Talk about getting ahead. Hello, folks. Welcome back to my channel. This is Goosebumps Homeboy 1982, back with another Goosebumps book review. And today, we're going to be looking at Headless Halloween, number 10 from series 2000. But before I move on to the story itself, I would like to say a few things about the front cover. Again, such a scary looking cover with basically a dark night sky with some glittering stars. You have the full moon, and in the foreground you have a headless buddy holding a green furry head that looks really, really creepy. And there's that big pumpkin jack-o'-lantern thing in the foreground, and it seems that the headless buddy is holding it, right? And it's actually, or using it as some kind of a crutch, right? And it is reflected, the title kind of, emphasizes this picture, right? Headless, right? This term, right? So I really, really, enjoyed this book. It was really, really good. And again, very ominous, as the front cover suggests. That's one of the darkest Goosebumps books, right? In the whole series, in my opinion, in all included, right? But what is this story about? I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, aren't I? So the story is about a kid named Brandon Plush, right? And basically, he's a bully, and he loves to scare the heck out of his sister Maya and his cousin Vinny, and he also happens to be babysitting some kids, and he likes to just play mean tricks on them, being, scaring them, telling them some scary stories. And basically, needless to say that he gets in trouble, especially at school, after he does something pretty nasty, which I would not be spoiling. But basically, to cut a long story short, he gets grounded, he gets punished, and by one of his teachers, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so he's punished for that, and he has to do some chores, which are not obviously something he enjoys doing. So he decides to get back on this teacher of this science teacher, Mr. Benson. He decides, he along with his friend Cal, to basically get even with him, right? And to break into his house. I mean, this is pretty bad. And they decide to do it on Halloween night, right? By basically breaking in and doing some, bad stuff, right? Which they're not supposed to be doing. So what happens is that they go on with their plan, but it kind of backfires, as it turns out that there's a little surprise waiting for them in the house, right? There's a little something, right? And I'm not going to tell you what it is, but then the kids have to run for the hills, and it basically, everything goes downhill, right? No pun intended. Those who have read the book know what I'm talking about. It literally goes downhill. It takes a turn for the worse in this book, right? For these characters. And well, I'm not going to be spoiling too much, but basically, Mr. Benson lives in that house that is on top of that hill that is overlooking that ravine. I forgot what it is called. Raven's Ravine. And he has that house on top of that hill, if I'm not mistaken, and they have to basically cross over this ravine. And what happens is that as they're running, because of something that happens, something is going to happen. They're going to have to, at some point, there's going to be something really, really big is going to happen. And then afterwards, Brendan is going to find out that he's going to find himself in a very strange part of town he doesn't know about. And he's going to meet that kid named, I don't want to tell you what it is. I'll let you find out for yourselves, for those who haven't read it. But basically, he's going to end up in that house where they're having that kind of, that Halloween party thing going, where they like to scare each other. It's a bunch of kids, and there's that basement, and well, to I don't want to spoil it, but there are going to be some gross stuff, including some cockroaches, and it's going to be really really creepy, and worms, right, and food like donuts and stuff like that, and well, it's going to be pretty intense, you know pretty scary, pretty disturbing. And Brandon is gonna decide to get the heck out of Dodge, right? Go away, run for his life, right? But then he's gonna find out. He's gonna make a shocking discovery, and well, that's the big twist, which I will not spoil because I don't wanna ruin this book for you because that's pretty big. But yeah, after that, yes, they're gonna be you know some development in the story, and then there's gonna be something to be done, right. So without spoiling too much, which is difficult with this kind of book, Headless Halloween is one of the darkest Goosebumps books I've ever read in my whole life, probably the darkest. And wow, this is so scary, especially for me. There are a lot of scenes in this story that are just totally terrifying. Now, I'm afraid of dogs, and there's going to be a scene involving attack dogs in this book, which I pictured as Dobermans, right? Man, that is creepy. There's this scene involving a house, and you know, there are this there's going to be a few scares here and there in the story. A house that is going to be these a house at some point near the end of the book where that has that reputation of I don't want to spoil it, but you'll see for yourselves. There are so many things that are terrifying in this book all throughout the story, especially there's some real intense scenes, such as obviously breaking into a house. That's a felony, that's juvenile, that's a crime, right? But it's in this book. There's some scary concepts, such as you know one character's is gonna be one character's yeah, something is I cannot spoil it, right? If I say it now, you're gonna find out, and I wouldn't want to do that for those who haven't read it, out of respect and not to spoil for you, but the story. But man, it's terrifying, and I have to say, I don't really, obviously this is a child's book, so it's a little foolish, and that, it's fictional. None of it is true, when they say, things like, that are like, for example, these so-called haunted houses, that, as you read it, that that's not true, right? It's just a story. It's just a child's book, but still there's some disturbing concepts in this book, some, very terrifying visuals. But yeah, it scares, all right. It doesn't feel short in scaring the reader out of his wits, right? So yeah, I wanted to review this book, re-review actually, because I reviewed it in the past, but I found out that I kind of spoiled a little bit, in that previous review. So I decided to remake it. So yeah, this is a pretty scary book. That's one of the scariest books in the whole Goosebumps series, in my opinion, because it's so scary, so terrifying, and there are things in this book. Even as somebody who is not a child, obviously, I'm not gonna tell you how old I am, but I'm not a child, and yet I was terrified by some scenes. Right, I was just terrified. This is just terrifying, man, and it can give nightmares. So please, if you happen to be parents of a teenager like 13, 14, wait until they're at least 15, or I don't know. To be honest with you, this book is just scary, man. It's not suitable for children, for young children, for young readers. And talk to them before reading this book, because this is fictional at the end of the day. We don't take it as it's all, fictional writing. It's not real, right? Obviously, but there are things that could definitely confuse kids and scare them. So please have a discussion with them before reading this book. Perhaps if you're an adult, read this book first for yourselves before handing it to your children. Don't have them read it first, because that's not a book I would want children around, to be honest with you. It's just too scary, right? And obviously, it's a good book. Don't get me wrong. It's scary. It's even foolish at times. But the end kind of, yes. Now let's talk a little bit about the end before we close up with my final thoughts. But the ending, yes, the book is pretty good. The story develops properly, but then the end kind of dumps the bed. I mean, the last few sentences in the book, you find out that it all leads to that, and you're like, what the heck is going on? I mean, this was, there was some kind of, you know, in the character who's unlikable, and you don't really feel sorry for that kind of character, but at least near the end, you could tell maybe that character can redeem himself a little bit. But then it ends up to that, and I'm like, what the heck is going on, right? Why did it lead up to that? Why the big build up to end up having this, this thing, right? And it's not, I don't want to spoil it, but you'll find out for yourselves. It dumps the bed, man. It's pretty disappointing. The ending, that is. And Michael Goosebumps, who has done so many great reviews and who has reviewed this book, I believe he said that too, that he didn't like the ending. And I gotta hand it to him. I didn't like it that much either, especially considering that the story was good for what it was at first, but then it just ends with that. It's like out of nowhere. What the heck is going on, man? But yeah, the characters are not very likable, especially Brandon and Cal, his friend. There's that strange kid, and let you find out for yourselves, who is pretty terrifying, disturbing. The characters themselves are very dislikable, in my opinion. They're just a bunch of rats. But the story itself is pretty good, in my opinion, for what it was, although very scary and disturbing. So please, yes, if you have to read it, know that it's just a story, it's not real and everything. But yeah, it has a lot of disturbing things in it. So if I were to rate this book on a scale from 1 to 10, I'd probably give it an 8.5 out of 10, probably. Yeah, 8.5 out of 10, because it's a good book. It's a pretty great book, but it's very scary and disturbing, and there's some visuals that are just, especially for those faint of heart, not for the faint of heart, because of what you could, be thinking, and there's some, graphic scenery. I mean, obviously it's a book, it's a story, but, we visualize things. But yeah, this is pretty scary. So 8.5 out of 10 for me for this book, named Headless Halloween. What about you, folks? What did you think about this book? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below. I would really love to hear about your thoughts and views on this book. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you, God willing, on another review for another Goosebumps book. In the meantime, folks, stay safe. Goodbye and take care. This is Goosebumps Homeboy 92 for you, signing off.